Babylon, Mesopotamia. The summer of 323 BC. In the royal palace of what had once been the capital of the Persian Empire, a 32-year-old man lies dying. He has ruled one of the largest empires in human history for just 13 years. He has led his army from the Mediterranean Sea to the Himalayas. He has fought and won every major battle he has ever commanded. He has founded more than 20 cities that will bear his name. He has been declared a god in Egypt and a great king in Persia. He has just returned from the edge of the known world, the mouth of the Indus River, and has begun planning a new campaign against Arabia. He has a fever he cannot shake. For days he has been drinking and feasting and holding meetings. Now he is in bed, unable to speak, surrounded by his generals who file past him one by one to receive a final look or gesture. His voice is gone. His breath is shallow. His hands, once capable of wielding a spear with such force that it pierced shield and armor together, can barely lift. According to one ancient account, when his generals asked him to whom he was leaving his empire, he managed only 3 words: to the strongest. He dies on the evening of the 10th or 11th of June 323 BC. His body, embalmed in honey, according to ancient practice, is fought over by his generals for years before being hijacked on its way to Macedonia and buried in Egypt. His empire, the largest the world has yet known, shatters within 2 decades into successor kingdoms that will shape the Eastern Mediterranean and Central Asia for 3 centuries afterwards. The dead king's name was Alexander III of Macedon. History would remember him for over 2,000 years as Alexander the Great. No conqueror before or since has done what he did in the time he had. He inherited a kingdom at 20. He was master of the Persian Empire by 26. He had reached the Indus by 30. He was dead at 32. In the centuries that followed, cities he founded would become centers of Greek learning. Trade routes he opened would bind 3 continents. The fusion of Greek and Eastern cultures he began, accidentally, sometimes reluctantly, would produce the Hellenistic world in which Cleopatra would eventually rule, in which Rome would grow to maturity, in which Christianity would be born. This is the story of Alexander the Great. Alexander was born in Pella, the capital of Macedon, in late July 356 BC. Macedon was not, in the Greek world of the time, considered a serious power. It was a rugged mountain kingdom in northern Greece, populated by people the southern Greeks often regarded as semi-barbarians, rough, rural, politically backward, given to tribal feuding and heavy drinking. The cultured city-states of Athens and Thebes and Corinth felt themselves superior in every way to their northern cousins. This assessment was, by the time of Alexander's birth, rapidly becoming obsolete. His father, Philip II of Macedon, had transformed the kingdom into a military and political power of the first rank. Philip was one of the most successful rulers of the 4th century BC, a ruthlessly practical man, a brilliant general, a master of diplomacy who preferred bribery and marriage alliances to warfare when he could manage it, and an innovator who rebuilt the Macedonian army from the ground up. Philip's key military innovation was the sarissa, a long infantry pike roughly 6 meters in length, and the disciplined phalanx formation that used it. Wielded in dense ranks, the Macedonian sarissa created a wall of spear points that projected 5 ranks deep from the front line. Combined with elite heavy cavalry on the wings, the companion cavalry, who would become Alexander's favorite arm, the Macedonian army was simply different from anything the southern Greeks had faced. It was also professional, paid, trained year-round, rather than being the amateur militia armies of the southern city-states. Alexander's mother was Olympias, a princess of Epirus, a region to the west of Macedon, and a woman of formidable intelligence, religious intensity, and political ruthlessness. Olympias was a member of a snake-handling ecstatic cult connected to the worship of Dionysus. Ancient sources report that she slept with serpents in her bed and believed herself descended from the hero Achilles. She was not a person one crossed lightly. She adored Alexander, encouraged his belief in his own special destiny, and spent much of his life maneuvering, often viciously, on his behalf. From an early age, Alexander was groomed to be a king. He was educated initially by Macedonian tutors. When he was 13, Philip summoned Aristotle, the most famous philosopher in Greece, who had himself been a student of Plato, to serve as Alexander's personal tutor for 3 years. Aristotle taught Alexander philosophy, political theory, rhetoric, biology, medicine, and literature. A famous story from his boyhood, recorded by the biographer Plutarch, describes Alexander taming a wild horse named Bucephalus when he was 12 years old. The horse had been offered for sale at a very high price, but was so wild that no one could mount him. Alexander's father, Philip, was about to reject the offer. Alexander insisted he could ride the horse. Philip, amused, accepted the wager that if Alexander failed, he would pay the price himself. Alexander had noticed that the horse was frightened by his own shadow. He turned the horse's head toward the sun so his shadow fell behind him, spoke gently, and mounted him. Bucephalus would carry Alexander for the next 20 years, through almost every major battle of his career. At 16, Alexander was appointed regent of Macedon, while Philip was away on campaign. He led his first military campaign in that year against a rebellious Thracian tribe, and founded his first city, Alexandropolis, from the Greek for City of Alexander. At 18, he commanded the elite companion cavalry at the Battle of Chaeronea in 338 BC, the battle in which Philip decisively defeated a combined Greek alliance led by Athens and Thebes, establishing Macedonian hegemony over all of Greece. Philip now turned his attention east. The Persian Empire, the vast realm that stretched from the Aegean coast of Anatolia to the Indus River, and that had menaced the Greek world for generations, was to be the target of a great pan-Hellenic campaign of revenge for the Persian invasions of Greece a century and a half earlier. Philip was preparing the invasion when, in the summer of 336 BC, he was assassinated in Macedon at a wedding celebration by one of his own bodyguards. The motive remains disputed. Some ancient sources hint at involvement by Olympias herself, who had become politically insecure after Philip had taken a younger Macedonian wife. Whatever the truth, Philip was dead. Alexander III of Macedon became king at the age of 20. The first challenge Alexander faced was simply staying on the throne. The news of Philip's death triggered a wave of opportunistic revolts across the territories Philip had brought under Macedonian influence. Tribal peoples to the north, Thracians, Illyrians, Tribalians, saw an untested young man on the Macedonian throne and rose in rebellion. So did the southern Greek city-states, led by Thebes, which had been bitterly resentful of Macedonian dominance since Chaeronea. Alexander's response, over the 18 months between his accession and his Persian invasion, established a pattern that would define his career. He moved with astonishing speed, a signature of his generalship, crossing enormous distances with small forces before his enemies had finished gathering. He defeated the Thracians in a mountain campaign. He crossed the Danube River and defeated the Getae. He crushed the Illyrians. Then, hearing that Thebes had declared independence, he force-marched his army south, covering the distance from Illyria to Thebes, roughly 300 miles over mountains, in 2 weeks, and stood before the city gates before the Thebans had even confirmed that Philip's son was still alive. Thebes refused to surrender. Alexander took the city by storm, and, in a decision meant to send a message to the rest of Greece, he allowed his allies from other Greek cities, cities that had suffered at Theban hands in earlier conflicts, to vote on the city's fate. They voted for destruction. Thebes was razed to the ground. Its population of perhaps 30,000 was either killed or sold into slavery. Only the house of the poet Pindar and its inhabitants were spared, at Alexander's specific order. The rest of Greece received the message. There would be no further major resistance during his lifetime. In the spring of 334 BC, Alexander crossed the Hellespont, the narrow strait between Europe and Asia, with an army of approximately 40,000 Macedonian and Greek soldiers. He was 22 years old. The Persian Empire he was invading was one of the largest states in the history of the ancient world, ruled by Darius III. On paper, the odds were absurd. The Persian Empire could field armies many times larger than Alexander's. It possessed enormous wealth. Its navy dominated the eastern Mediterranean. What Alexander had in his favor was the tool his father had built, a professional, disciplined, battle-tested army, led by experienced senior officers who had served under Philip, and the new king's own emerging gift for command. He also had a strategic clarity that the Persians lacked. Alexander intended to destroy the Persian army in the field, seize the treasuries that funded it, and cut off Persian naval capacity by capturing the coastal cities from which Persian fleets operated. Once those objectives were achieved, the Persian Empire would collapse of its own weight. His first major battle came within weeks of landing. At the Granicus River in May 334 BC, Alexander attacked a Persian army of roughly similar size. He led the assault personally from the front, at the head of his companion cavalry, fording the river under enemy missile fire. In the chaos of the battle, he nearly lost his life. An axe blow split his helmet and would have killed him had one of his officers not struck down his attacker. He killed several Persian nobles personally in single combat. It set the pattern for his career. Alexander fought at the front, was repeatedly wounded, sometimes seriously, and never led from the rear. The Granicus was a Macedonian victory. Alexander followed it by moving down the Aegean coast of what is now Turkey, liberating or conquering, depending on one's perspective, the Greek cities that had been under Persian rule for over a century. He then cut inland across Anatolia, reaching the famous city of Gordion, where, according to legend, an oracle had foretold that whoever could untie the Gordian knot, a complex knot tying a wagon to a pole, would rule all of Asia. Alexander, unable to untie it, cut through it with his sword. The gesture became shorthand for Alexander himself. When faced with a problem his contemporaries found intractable, he simply applied force and moved on. In November 333 BC, at a place called Issus, on the narrow coastal plain where modern Turkey meets Syria, Alexander fought his first full-scale battle against the Persian great king himself. Darius III had assembled an army that outnumbered Alexander's by at least 2 to 1, possibly by much more, and had, through a strategic maneuver, positioned himself across Alexander's supply line, forcing him to turn and fight on ground of Darius's choosing. The Persian choice turned out to be a trap of their own making. The coastal plain at Issus was too narrow for the Persians to deploy the full weight of their numerical superiority. Alexander's tactical instinct, here as in most battles, was to identify the critical point on the field and smash it with a concentrated cavalry charge at the decisive moment. That critical point was Darius himself. In the middle of the battle, Alexander led the companion cavalry in a flying wedge directly at the Persian king's position. Darius, seeing his bodyguards cut down around him and the Macedonian line advancing, lost his nerve and fled in his chariot, abandoning his army. And, as it turned out, his wife, his mother, and his children, who were in the Persian camp behind the battle lines. The Persian army disintegrated. Alexander captured the entire royal family. He treated them with the scrupulous courtesy expected of a king toward royal women, a gesture that became famous in the Persian world and was used in later Greek literature as the proof of his royal character. Darius's wife would later die in captivity from illness. His mother, Sisigambis, is said by some ancient sources to have survived Alexander, developed a genuine affection for him, and died of grief when news reached her of his death. Alexander spent 332 BC working his way down the eastern Mediterranean coast, taking the Phoenician cities one by one in order to deny their ports to the Persian fleet. The siege of Tyre, the great island fortress of the ancient Phoenicians, considered impregnable, lasted 7 months. To reach the city, Alexander had his engineers build a mole out into the sea, a causeway extending nearly a kilometer from the mainland to the island. The Tyrians resisted fiercely. When the city finally fell, Alexander sold approximately 30,000 inhabitants into slavery and crucified 2,000 of the surviving defenders along the beach. It was one of the more savage acts of his career, and it served its intended purpose. After Tyre, the remaining Phoenician cities surrendered. From the Mediterranean coast, Alexander turned south to Egypt. Egypt, which had been under Persian rule for 2 centuries and was deeply resentful of it, welcomed Alexander without resistance. The Egyptian priesthood acknowledged him as pharaoh. He traveled into the western desert to the famous oracle of Amun at Siwa, where, according to ancient sources, the priests greeted him as a son of the god. What Alexander made of this privately is unknown. Publicly, he began to encourage stories of his divine paternity, stories which his companions variously indulged, humored, or privately mocked. In Egypt, he founded the first and most important of his many Alexandrias, Alexandria by Egypt, at the mouth of the Nile. It would become, within 2 centuries, the greatest city of the Hellenistic world. The final great engagement of the Persian campaign came at Gaugamela, a flat plain in northern Mesopotamia that Darius had specifically selected and leveled for his army. Here, finally, Darius had the space to deploy his full forces. The Persian army at Gaugamela was almost certainly the largest Alexander ever faced, perhaps 100,000 men or more. Alexander's forces were perhaps 47,000. The night before the battle, Alexander's senior general Parmenion urged a surprise night attack to neutralize the numerical disadvantage. Alexander refused. He would not, he said, steal victory. He slept so deeply that his officers had to wake him in the morning. The ensuing battle on the 1st of October, 331 BC, was tactically brilliant. Alexander opened gaps in the Persian line through a feigned movement to his right, then drove the companion cavalry in another wedge directly at Darius himself. Darius fled for the second time. The Persian army broke. Alexander was now, for all practical purposes, the great king. Over the following months, he took Babylon, Susa, and Persepolis, the symbolic and administrative capitals of the empire, in rapid succession. At Persepolis, the ceremonial heart of Persian kingship, his soldiers set fire to the great palace complex, in an episode that ancient sources describe as partly drunken, partly the result of a drinking party incitement, partly a calculated symbolic burning meant as revenge for the Persian burning of Athens a century and a half earlier. Whatever the exact motive, the irreplaceable archives of the Achaemenid Persian Empire were destroyed. Darius III was murdered by his own satrap Bessus in the summer of 330 BC while fleeing east. Alexander found his body, covered it with his own cloak, and sent it for royal burial in Persepolis. The war between Macedon and the Persian Empire was over. Alexander was the last king standing. With the Persian king dead, Alexander could have declared victory and returned home. The Pan-Hellenic War of revenge against Persia had been conclusively won. No Macedonian or Greek soldier would have disputed that the objective was achieved. Instead, Alexander announced that the campaign would continue. He was not merely avenging Greece, he was conquering the world. From 330 to 327 BC, Alexander campaigned in the eastern provinces of the former Persian Empire, Bactria, Sogdiana, and the regions that are today Afghanistan, Uzbekistan, and Tajikistan. These were some of the hardest campaigns of his career. The terrain was brutal. High mountains, extreme winters, vast deserts. The enemy was not a conventional army, but a decentralized network of tribal warlords and fortified hill towns led by commanders, most notably a warrior named Spitamenes, who fought Alexander through guerrilla tactics that the Macedonian army was poorly suited to counter. It was during these years that Alexander began to change, or perhaps that the pressure of absolute power began to reveal aspects of his character that had always been present. He adopted elements of Persian royal ceremonial, including the diadem and purple robes of the great king. He married Roxane, the daughter of a Bactrian warlord, in 327 BC, partly for personal reasons, and partly to cement his legitimacy among the eastern peoples of the former Persian Empire. He attempted to introduce proskynesis, the Persian practice of prostration before the king, at his court. His Macedonian officers resisted furiously. To them, prostration was an act reserved for gods. Macedonian kings were first among equals, and they did not expect to be worshipped. The strains took dark turns. In 330 BC, Philotas, one of Alexander's senior generals, the son of Parmenion, the most experienced Macedonian commander, was accused of involvement in a conspiracy against the king. After torture, Philotas confessed, or was forced to confess. He was executed by the army. Alexander then sent assassins to Media, where Parmenion was guarding the imperial treasury, and had the old general killed before he could learn of his son's death. It was an act of political brutality that shocked many of Alexander's companions. Parmenion had served Macedon for decades and had been Philip's most trusted general. His killing was widely understood as preemptive. Alexander could not leave a grieving father in charge of the treasury. In 328 BC, at a drunken banquet in Samarkand, Alexander killed his close friend and senior cavalry officer, Clitus the Black, in a sudden rage. Clitus had saved Alexander's life at the Granicus. He had now, at the banquet, openly mocked Alexander for taking credit for his father's achievements and for favoring Persian practices. Alexander, drunk, seized a spear from a guard and ran Clitus through. He was reportedly devastated afterwards, locking himself in his tent for days, refusing food and water, calling himself a murderer. But the killing happened. In 327 BC, Alexander crossed the Hindu Kush into the Indus Valley, modern-day Pakistan and northwestern India. Here, he fought perhaps the most difficult pitched battle of his career, at the Hidaspo River in 326 BC against the Indian king Porus. The Macedonians faced war elephants for the first time on that scale, fighting in torrential monsoon rain that made the ground treacherous and the rivers impassable. Alexander's tactical brilliance produced another victory. When the captured Porus was brought before him and Alexander asked how he wished to be treated, Porus replied, "As a king." Alexander reinstated him as ruler of his kingdom, a gesture of respect that, according to ancient sources, sealed Porus's loyalty to the Macedonian cause. But it was at the Hyphasis River, modern Bas, that the army finally broke with Alexander. After more than 8 years of continuous campaigning, the Macedonian veterans refused to go further east. They had heard reports of even larger armies and more war elephants beyond the Ganges. They were exhausted, far from home, and finally, for the first time, defeated not by an enemy, but by fatigue. Alexander sulked in his tent for 3 days. Then he accepted the reality and turned back. It was the only time in his career that he failed to get his way on a question of strategy. The return from India was catastrophic. Alexander divided his forces. The main body of the army would march westwards through the Gedrosian Desert along the coast of the Arabian Sea, while the fleet sailed back under the command of his admiral Nearchus. The desert march of 325 BC was a nightmare. Alexander took what may have been the worst possible route, either out of strategic ignorance or as a deliberate test of his own endurance and that of his army. Temperatures exceeded 50 degrees Celsius. Water was scarce to non-existent. Camp followers, women, children, and wounded soldiers died in massive numbers. Estimates vary, but it is possible that Alexander lost more soldiers in the desert crossing than in all his battles combined. When he finally reached Susa in early 324 BC, Alexander staged an enormous royal wedding in which he married 2 Persian princesses, one a daughter of Darius III, the other a daughter of the earlier king Artaxerxes III, and had approximately 80 of his senior officers simultaneously married to Persian women. The ceremony was a statement of his vision for the empire, a genuine fusion of Macedonian and Persian ruling classes, bound together by intermarriage. The Macedonian veterans were increasingly unhappy. They had not signed up for an empire that would merge them with their defeated enemies. They had also begun to realize that Alexander intended never to return home, that the center of his empire would be in Asia, and that Macedon itself was to become a provincial backwater of his new, enormous Afro-Eurasian state. In 324 BC at Opis, on the Tigris River, the discontent finally exploded into a mass mutiny. Alexander, with characteristic theatrical control, broke the mutiny by announcing the dismissal of his Macedonian forces and the establishment of an all-Persian royal army. The Macedonians, horrified at being replaced, broke ranks and begged him to relent. Alexander made a public reconciliation. A banquet followed at which Macedonians and Persians ate and drank together. In the summer of 323 BC, Alexander was at Babylon, making preparations for his next campaign, an invasion of Arabia. He was also mourning the death of his closest companion, the cavalry general Hephaestion, who had died of illness at Ecbatana a few months earlier. Hephaestion had been Alexander's intimate companion since boyhood. The two men had been educated together under Aristotle. Contemporary and later sources describe their relationship as among the deepest of Alexander's life, explicitly comparing it to that between Achilles and Patroclus in the Iliad, a comparison that both men may have cultivated. Alexander's grief was unrestrained. He shaved his head, ordered the manes of his horses cut in mourning, and had the doctor who had treated Hephaestion executed. On the 29th of May, Alexander attended a long banquet. He drank heavily. He developed a fever overnight. The fever intensified and did not break. Over the following days, he attempted to conduct normal business, meetings, sacrifices, preparations for the Arabian expedition, but grew progressively weaker. By the 10th of June, he could not speak. His generals filed past him for a last look. On the evening of the 10th or 11th of June, 323 BC, Alexander III of Macedon died. He was 32 years old. The cause of death remains disputed by historians to this day. Possibilities include malaria, typhoid fever, acute pancreatitis, poisoning, or complications from the multiple serious battle wounds he had sustained. Alexander left no adult heir. Roxane was pregnant at the time of his death and eventually gave birth to a son, Alexander IV, but the empire could not wait for a baby to come of age. Alexander's generals, the Diadochi, or successors, began to fight over the empire within weeks. Over the following 40 years, they fought one another in a series of wars that eventually divided his conquests among three major successor dynasties: the Ptolemies in Egypt, the Seleucids in most of the Asian territories, and the Antigonids in Macedon and Greece. Alexander IV and his mother Roxane were both murdered in the process. But the empire itself, though it fragmented politically, left a cultural legacy that proved enduring. The successor kingdoms were ruled by Greek-speaking royal houses and administered in Greek. Greek became the language of government, trade, and learning from the Mediterranean coast of Egypt to the plains of Afghanistan. The cities Alexander and his successors founded, more than 20 still recognizable, including Alexandria in Egypt, Alexandria on the Oxus in Central Asia, and Alexandria in Caucasia in modern Afghanistan, became centers of a hybrid culture in which Greek philosophy, science, art, and theater fused with the older civilizations of Egypt, Mesopotamia, and India. The Hellenistic world that followed Alexander was, in many ways, the first genuinely cosmopolitan civilization of the ancient Mediterranean and Middle East. It produced major figures in science: Euclid, Archimedes, Eratosthenes, and in philosophy, Epicurus, Zeno of Citium, Pyrrho. It sustained the Buddhist-Greek cultural fusion that eventually produced some of the most beautiful sculpture of the ancient world in the Greco-Buddhist art of the Gandhara region. Its successor states remained recognizably influential until Rome absorbed the last of them, Ptolemaic Egypt under Cleopatra, in 30 BC. He was also a man who destroyed cities without mercy. He killed close friends in fits of paranoia and drunken rage. He killed somewhere in the hundreds of thousands of people across his campaigns, soldiers and civilians combined, many of them in populations that had done him no particular harm beyond being in his path. He cannot honestly be separated from the cost of what he did. Subsequent conquerors, from Caesar to Napoleon to rulers of the Islamic and Indian worlds, modeled themselves explicitly on Alexander. He became the template for a certain kind of masculine political ambition that Western and much of non-Western civilization has spent 2,000 years romanticizing, debating, and attempting to live up to. That itself is a fact of immense historical consequence. At 32, Alexander had accomplished more, covered more territory, founded more cities, and fundamentally restructured more civilizations than any individual had before him, or arguably has since. Whether what he accomplished should be counted as a gift to human civilization, or as a catastrophe visited upon it, is a question that history never fully settles. Like most of the greatest and most terrible figures, Alexander is both answers at the same time. Thank you for watching Biographia. If this documentary gave you a new perspective on one of history's most extraordinary figures, please subscribe. A new biography documentary is coming very soon. Leave a comment below with the historical figure you most want us to cover next.